I think I have the button. And here we are. We're live now. You can go now. Sorry for all the wait.
Okay, great. Thanks, Karen. Thank you so much for setting up the logistics for this. We're live on YouTube and we're streaming from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Morgane and Francois and Karen, are you also on these territories?
Yes. Yeah. Also.
Great. Yeah. Excellent. I do reflect that in our discussion today, the territorial acknowledgement is really of critical importance because there is a VSB land asset strategy and the host nations will be involved and consulted on that land asset strategy. We are ecstatic that we're actually having this meeting. So we had an idea to educate and make everyone really aware of the disconnect that is apparent in our city, UBC, and our host nations, which are all planning for major growth. So we see this growth around us and we feel it, and we know that the city is going to become much more dense. And then on the other side, our school district is planning for major decline. The school district recently, the board passed a long-range facilities plan that calls for 5,422 fewer kids than today, 10 years from now. So kind of mind-boggling in this terms of this giant delta. So we wanted this to be, made public and, no better time than an election. So 2 days ago, we had this idea to put together 16 big questions and have it sent out to the mayors and candidates, council candidates. And we got 4 responses, which is absolutely amazing because these were, the mayors and the candidates were given 24 hours to answer 16 detailed questions. So Mike Weeb from the Vancouver Green Party answered. Leona Brown, independent mayoral candidate, answered. And Francois Renault, independent candidate for mayor, answered. And Morgane Osher answered from the Progress Vancouver Party. So this was really fantastic. And we're blessed here to have 2 of the people here. So this is not really now going to be a debate. It's going to be more of a roundtable and a discussion around why is there a disconnect and what will it take for this connection to be aligned so that we have housing growth aligned with school spaces so that we really get that complete community feeling that we have a neighborhood school, that we build community and we create belonging. So with that, I'd love to pass it over to, in the order that we received the replies. So Francois, would you please make some opening remarks on what you see out there? And of course, please provide your disclaimer as well and make an introduction about yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vic, and hi to anybody who happens to be watching this. My name is Françoise Ronet, and I am an independent candidate for Mayor of Vancouver. I am also, I have to admit, I am a current VSB employee, and I just want to make it really clear that I am here this evening wearing my citizen hat. I'm here as an individual with opinions who lives in the city of Vancouver and has school-age children. I am in no way speaking as a VSB employee at this moment, and just to make that absolutely clear, I'm here as an individual and not necessarily as a VSB employee. So Vic, thank you very much. This is something that has actually been on my radar for a super long time. The first time I ran for office was in 2011, and one of the big issues was education funding. Because when I graduated from high school in 1992, the BC budget there was about 23% of the total budget expenditures were on education. And now 30 years later, we're looking at, it depends on the budget, but somewhere between 10 and 13% of total government spending goes to education. So although the amount has maybe gone up over the last 30 years, in terms of it being a priority for government, it's clear that successive governments have been letting down the students of this province. And one of the biggest issues is the fact that there are so many kids in Vancouver who currently don't have access to their neighborhood schools. So we saw it in the Olympic Village development. We're seeing it happen again in the River District, which I happen to live very close to. And I know we'll be talking about that this evening, but yeah, it's definitely something that's on my radar. And I believe we can do a heck of a lot better for the children of our city. So thank you.
Thank you, Francois. And same for you, Morgan.
Thank you very much, Vic, and I'm very grateful to DPAC for organizing this. I think it's a really good idea to have conversation across the jurisdictions, and City Council and the Mayor's office have a lot to say actually about Vancouver School Board and education and schooling in Vancouver, even though of course City Council doesn't have a say about the internals of how Vancouver spends its money. So I'm Morgan Auger. I'm running for City Council with Progress Vancouver. We're running 6 City Council candidates, and Mark Marison is the candidate for mayor. And I'm a past DPAC chair. I was DPAC chair in 2016, 17, when we successfully organized parents to push back on the closure of 13 Vancouver schools, of which 12 were in the east side. So the long range facilities plan is, I remember it as a tool of war. And, it's interesting what putting something into a document does to the truth, which has been brought up very often. But I've had my opportunity to reflect on all of this a lot. How do we address Vancouver's chronic problem with schooling and school funding? There's no doubt that there's less per student funding in BC than there was in the past. There's also no doubt, and I can see this as a parent myself, kids who excel in school have no problem, and kids who struggle or who have specific needs have a much harder time. And the situation is particularly dire for kids who have designations, special needs designations. The families that have kids with special needs designation know what I'm talking about when I say that the quality of care has fallen so much that parents will do anything they can to get their kids out of the public school system, because anything is better than what we've got in Vancouver School Board schools. And now I'm mindful that I'm also a past vice president of the BC NDP, and I recognize, I'll recognize fully that the BC NDP government is in government now, and therefore, policies of the BC NDP government are policies that I've supported and voted for inside of my own party at that level. Nevertheless, what I see in Vancouver, and that's gonna be the end of my opening statement. I see that we have schools where people are not, and we have people where schools are not, and that's the fundamental issue in the city. Aside from the internal funding of Vancouver School Board, program funding and so forth, which is outside of jurisdiction of where I am trying to get elected, within the jurisdiction of where I'm trying to get elected, the city of Vancouver has a housing crisis. The housing crisis causes a homelessness crisis, causes a mental health crisis, causes a food security crisis, a number of crises. And at the bottom of this is the affordability crisis of single family housing in Vancouver, which touches directly on the Vancouver School Board, because the affordability crisis in Vancouver especially hits single family housing because it's too expensive for anybody with children in Vancouver schools, or most people, let's say. I can usually sweep the room and say, none of us here can afford to buy a single family house today unless we've inherited money. Here, it's harder to say because I can't see it. But the issue in the end is that it's just too expensive to live where there are schools with capacity, and in the schools and in the neighborhoods where we've built up multifamily housing, everybody is huddled in there because that's the only place in Vancouver that young families can afford. And that's where the schools are over capacity. Plus, of course, the school next to that school. And the solution to this is to get people to be able to live in the places where today no young families can live, the single family housing area. And Progress Vancouver's policy is centered on making the areas that are currently single family housing, multifamily housing, 4 stories for condos, 6 stories for nonprofit housing and for purpose-built rentals. And by doing that, adjacent to schools, we're going to make it affordable to be next to the schools that today young families mostly can't afford to be next to.
Great. This is a phenomenal setting of the stage for, unpacking the problem. If we unpack the problem in a concise solution approach, we're at the point now as a city where we need to make up our mind when it comes to our schools. Either we basically accept that, some parts of the city are forever going to be a perfect suburbia within a city, and they're going to remain, single family type, we got duplex zoning everywhere, but the duplex zoning doesn't really matter because you have outright choice to build whatever you want. And there's enough, there's millions and millions of multimillionaires in the world that will covet a Vancouver lot and build a single family house. So that's the issue, is that if we decide that we want to go into that path of empowering the suburban attitude, then we don't need schools. So that could be one choice. We close schools because we know we're going to make a decision to be a suburbia. That's option A. Option B is we're going to build housing where we have empty school spaces. So now let's dive into this and unpack that a little bit. So everyone's talking about densifying everywhere in Vancouver. So everyone's kind of talking about 4 floors or 6 floors. Let's just take 4 floors. Okay. So if it's 4 floors, and there's not much disagreement on that, what will enable, without land assembly, the densest form of housing, so that independents who build a family house today or a duplex today can get into building the 3-floor or 4-floor independent new type of more dense family-centric environment of housing. And then that way you get a lot of trickle that happens. So what are the options here? Let's go with Morgan first.
Okay, so I'm gonna start by talking about employers, because if Vancouver tolerates a situation where we have fewer and fewer families that can live here, Vancouver is going to tolerate middle managers like me not being able to live in the city. All of us who have children have jobs. If fewer of us can live in the city with our children, because we can only live in little tiny places, the problem is going to be that the employers are not going to be able to staff the high pay jobs, the jobs that we're trying to attract into the city. The city of Vancouver needs growth in order to attract growth. And I know there's a philosophical debate about maybe we should just have like no more growth anywhere. We could be a zero growth society, but growth is the engine of the commerce. Businesses need growth in order to thrive. And this is a real challenge. So in my non-political life, I'm a middle manager in a technology team of a major big box retailer. And I don't have any staff that lives in main part of Vancouver. I believe I have one staff member who lives right on the edge of Burnaby, and the others live like 2 or 3 jurisdictions over. None of them want to live in Vancouver. It's too expensive, and the schooling isn't good enough. It's not nice enough to justify the costs. So we need a thriving Vancouver where there are schools, and we need the schools to be where people are. But Vic, you mentioned wanting to avoid land assembly. Avoiding land assembly is an important factor if the land assembly results in a permit to buy multifamily housing, which results in uplift in the property of the land, which results in more expensive land, which is paid for by the tenants, which adds nothing to the equation. But if all of the land has been zoned default multifamily housing, it doesn't matter if you have an assembly or not. Like, people don't care. You want to build multifamily housing on one chunk of land? Here are the patterns you should use.
Yeah.
If you want to build it on 4 pieces of land together, it can be bigger, but it doesn't lift up the value of the land. You still have the same potential per square foot on the land because the permits are the same. That's the model that we ascribe to. And I think that's the only way that we can get a Vancouver that's thriving, where people want to live here and people can actually afford to live here.
I totally agree. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with Morgan that it's the issue with land assembly is the inflation of land value. And if we did a citywide rezoning, then we would eliminate that problem. But I think it's really important also that we consider what we're going to do with city-owned land, because I think that on the one hand, we do need to let the private sector build on private land, the kind of housing that families and everybody, residents of Vancouver need. But I also think that we need to make sure that we preserve the public land that we still have, and it's a dwindling supply because a lot of it has been, like back in the 80s, the expo lands, and we've had a lot of publicly held land that has gone to private development. I think it's really important that moving forward, we make a commitment that all remaining city-owned lands are going to be preserved for public benefit. So that means that we're going to use it for public housing, parks, community centers, schools, and we're not going to see the kinds of deals that we've seen over the last few decades where developers are allowed to develop on what was previously public land in exchange for like a small percentage of affordable housing. So I'm thinking like, the viaducts, for example, when those come down and we free up a lot of land right next to the stadiums in a very centrally located part of the city, I think it's important that we keep that land for the public housing and the public goods that a 21st century city needs, So I just want to add that. I haven't heard that commitment from any of the other mayoral candidates or parties, but that's something that's really important to me. Public stays in public hands. Private can be developed on private lands. And I also think that we need to look at what's being done in other places around the world, because there are solutions to these kinds of problems. I'm not an architect, but I have seen some really nice architectural renderings that show what's possible on a single family lot or, on 2 single family lots side by side. And I actually, I attended university back in the 90s in Portland, Oregon. And when I was there a few years ago visiting a friend, I learned an interesting thing. My friend told me that apparently in Portland, when you want to tear down a single family home, there's a rule, a bylaw that says that you must replace it with higher density. Like, you can't replace a single family home with another single family home. So if you want a single family home, you buy one and it needs to be renovated, you need to maintain the existing structure. So that would also kind of help to preserve a bit of those maybe more character or heritage buildings that exist around the city. So, ideas like that, I think, are things that we need to really be open to all possibilities, because the good ideas aren't going to come from any one place along the political spectrum. They're going to come from everywhere, and we need to have all hands on deck to solve the very pressing and urgent crises that we're facing. So.
This is fantastic. So I think we've really established that, the option for school closure in the schools that are, quote, emptier than other ones should not be done. And because the city is going to change, we are going to become more dense. I really want to focus on that. I wanted to focus on that single family lot because for us, we want that family centric. And when we hear making home, you could have 6, units. And, when we hear about units only, and then we dive into the details a little bit and you find out, well, these are all going to be 6 times 800 square feet average. Well, you're not getting the mix of 2 and 3 bedroom units out of that will produce livable homes for families. That's where I wanted to go with that one. But one of the takeaways here when it comes back to schools is our annex land. So annexes are, kind of like very small schools, K to 3. And educationally, some parents love them because they feel that they have better education for their children. But then a lot of resources are not there. So in fact, bigger schools can provide more resources and in a way better education through clubs and activities and that kind of thing. So it also depends on the age of your child. So there's pros and cons to small schools. But the land that these annexes sit on is extremely important. And I want us to recognize that and look at one thing that we've asked mayors and council, which is purely in the view of mayors and councils. And that is for anything that the VSB does, for the city to act as a check and a balance, to simply issue a community impact statement. What would you feel about such a governance type of tool that would be policy that the city would automatically have to trigger? We have to issue a community impact statement because the city's timeline goes 25, 30 years, whereas a VSB timeline is 9 to 10 years. Thoughts on that, Francois, first?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is a really interesting thing to consider. And the reason that I hesitated in the survey on this question is because of the lack of funding, right? Like the VSB as it is doesn't have the funds that it needs to run the programs that the students of our city deserve. It's just a fact. We're not getting enough money from the provincial government to pay for the schools as they exist right now. And so I'd be concerned with adding a layer that would make it hard for the VSB to allocate the meager funds that they have.
But we don't want to burn furniture to heat the house.
What's that?
We do not want to burn furniture to heat the house.
Absolutely.
So
No.
disposing land is, a last resort. But there is, there are other funding sources. So we'll get to that too.
But I mean, I think when you look at the decision to close an under-enrolled school, I would never in a million years want to see that land sold for revenue. Like that's just a flat out no. But to think that maybe at some time in the future it may be necessary to close a school that really is like draining a lot of money from the VSB's operating budget in order to, maybe turn it into a revenue generation potential, right? That if you rented it to community facilities or if you did something like, I worry about creating barriers to
So Francois, let's gate that with 99-year lease, so it's out of the public domain for a long time.
Yeah.
So
no
one's ever going to sell anything, right? So we're looking at the 99-year option, right? I don't think you'd be able to sell VSB land in today's environment, especially when the host nations have not been consulted either. So a 99-year lease is going to be the default, but what it means then is it's taken out of the public domain for a long time.
Like Kingsgate Mall, for example.
Right, which is half left, right? So half over. So there's something to look forward to as the Broadway plan develops. But that's where the gate has to be on that 99-year lease. Of course, if we can, we have space in the main school and there's no plan for the next 5 years, you know what? You can basically move the annex kids into the main school, lease out the annex short-term, 5-10 years. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right. So we're not looking at removing all flexibility. We're looking for that community impact statement because the city is smart enough to know whether this is a 5-year lease or a 99-year lease. Right.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you for clarifying, because that was my I don't know. I don't want to make it more challenging for them when they're already so strapped for cash,
Morgan.
I think it's important to remember that the city doesn't have jurisdiction over the province. And in this conversation, the city cannot impose such a thing on the province. The city can certainly offer to review
The city is,
ideas.
the city is
Ideas.
offering its own opinion, its
That's
own
right.
interest, its own residents, and what they will need in
Right.
25 years from now.
Right, but the city has been doing this consistently, and when the province doesn't agree with the city, the province ignores the city, which is
That's
what
okay.
happens, right? So it's
Let
important
the
to
province ignore
understand.
the city. At least we know where to,
Operationally,
at least we know where to point to. Right now, we don't know where to point to.
right, but what happens? So what happens in politics, right, is that no decision is made without justification. The justification surfaces to justify it, and then the decision is made, right? We
What
see
happens in politics is we basically get the
a
runaround.
lot, right?
This guy
So
points there, this guy points there. We want now the city to say, this is our interest. Here's what the city says. And now the province can do whatever they want.
the city can give advice today and can give feedback about the consequences of taking away capacity, the consequences about where capacity is. The city can give advice on its planning, its zoning, and so forth, right? And there's no doubt that models to, a number of models have been surfaced inside of Vancouver School Board to try to come up with a way to compensate for the well over 100 million a year of missed opportunity from non-enrolled children. There's roughly, top of the envelope calculation, 12,000 kids not in the seats, right? In that capacity, if I'm not wrong. Isn't it 12,000?
You are wrong there, but
no, I think, okay, I could be wrong, it doesn't matter, but the point is, I think
I'll just give you a small example of why there's a problem with the empty seat narrative.
There's been a lot of advocacy about how that's wrong, right? Nevertheless,
I'll give you the real example.
With it.
The real example is a quick one. The real example is me going into a school. The school is called Graham Bruce Elementary. It's a California modern architecture. So the VSB and the ministry believe that there's 4 empty classrooms in that school. Well, I had a tour of the entire school, and there is 1 empty classroom you could claim, but you'd have to remove the staff room to claim that 1 empty classroom. That's a condition in that school. But what we go by is ministry blueprints. So you need to do an audit to really figure out how many empty seats do you have? And until that's done, let's not go there into 12,000 or 5,000. But we do know we have space in certain parts of the city.
We do know that the city of Vancouver
lottery in the country.
Okay, what we know, right, is that teachers are fleeing Vancouver because it's a worse environment to work than the adjacent districts, which are funded exactly the same way, but can afford better funding for the teachers.
So why?
We know that parents are taking their kids out of the city because the combination of affordability and quality of the environments of the schools is a negative factor. Look, I've been an education activist quite a bit of my past, right? And I agree with you that the Vancouver has a number of issues, and these are internal funding issues between the city of between the province and the Vancouver Board of Education. I really don't want to get in the middle of that, right? Because that's a no-win situation, and everybody knows it. But the truth is, right? The funder, whoever that is, it's the province, has an idea of what the city should hold up, and whatever that usage level, the city of Vancouver can organize to fight against it. Every school board together can, but nevertheless, the funder decides because the funder pays. And we can rail at the unfairness of reality, but it's reality, right? The funder pays and decides how they're going to pay. And we're in the city of Vancouver, we run into some serious consequences of the unevenness of the usage, right? Empty schools versus overused schools. And B, the average usage. I mean, it's been, province has made it pretty clear. City of Vancouver is not going to get more schools unless usage goes up, right? They don't say that to other districts. They say that only to our district. And that's because usage is down. And we can argue against the minutia, detail by detail, but ultimately they are the one who pay. And I'm on your side about it would be good to have the appropriate amount of funding to get the job done. And I totally agree that the people who pay the price of this fight between school board and province is the people whose kids have a designation. Or the people whose kids have financial challenges or other non-mainstream needs. Those are the
or
families
even,
that pay
but
the price.
Morgan, or even just kids who can't get into their local kindergarten. You know, I mean,
Well,
if you
that's
move,
different.
to a neighborhood in Vancouver, you expect that the school in that
Yep.
neighborhood is going to be available for your child. You research the local schools, you choose the neighborhood based on what you've learned about the local schools, and you know, parents, I think it's a reasonable expectation that your kid is going to be connected to a school that's connected to your neighborhood. So it
Yes,
is, I
but
mean,
that
like, yes, kids with designations, but I think it is a bit broader. I think it affects every family that is currently
uh,
having to
of course,
drive their kids to a school like, you know, 4 neighborhoods away.
right, but that's only that situation is driven by the fact that that family can't afford to live somewhere else where there is an alternative, right? You could say that in Yaletown, you could say that it's purely by choice. An argument could be made that some neighborhoods are more expensive and people flock to them, and therefore it would be desirable to have more school infrastructure. But and again, nobody on this conversation is a decision maker here. But knowing what I know from, advocacy for so long and having worked through this question in so many ways, ultimately, if a lot of people want to live in a place where there's only so much kindergarten capacity, that's a limiter on the neighborhood so that people go and live somewhere else. But the problem today is it's not fair because that's the only neighborhood they can afford to live in. That's the problem today. The problem today is we have the high density arterials and certain neighborhoods in the East Side, who are highly densified, and the schools don't keep up. Why do the schools don't keep up? They don't keep up because the schools are already built, but they're somewhere else. The school board is not going to burn down a school basically and build another school somewhere else. The province is, I would be very surprised to hear the province is going to pay for this. The province also politically can't sell the land of that school. That's awful, right? The only solution is to bring people there, I propose.
Mhm.
There's pragmatically, we can argue about how it would be nice if Crosstown Elementary was twice the size that it is, but it isn't,
Okay,
right?
so, okay,
And it's not going to be double in size in the next 20 years, and that's all there is to it.
okay,
We don't have power over this.
let's bring this back home for the audience in a real example. Okay, so real case study that you guys answered, thank you very much, was on the River District.
Mhm.
So the River District is a place that, is what like Morgan is describing. It is a place of affordability for a lot of families, for young families.
Mhm.
It's actually quite new. It's got quite a bit of vibrancy there. If you go there, you feel like, wow, this is like a future Olympic Village area up and coming here. It got a little buzz there, it got energy. It's right by the Fraser River. So really great. The city did take a piece of land and set it aside for a school. Now, the strategy that everyone has adopted, this is now all our planners. So you can look at the VSB planners, you can look at the city planners, and then you can look at the ministry planners. So the strategy that everyone has adopted is no one's going to build a new school right in the neighborhood in River District because there's empty schools that are about a 40-minute walk away.
Mm.
That's not walkable. That doesn't build community. There's a giant hill.
Mhm.
And if you're a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, walks take twice as long. And there's not even that great bus service. So one of the ideas that someone had was, okay, let's at least build some community. Let's just at least bus the kids.
I think that was my idea.
Can you talk about that more?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. We're not going to get the schools tomorrow. I live like right near the River District. We moved to this neighborhood. We were lucky enough to get into a co-op. Yay, co-op housing. In 2016, we moved down to like the far southeast corner of the city, foot of Nanaimo. So I'm about a 20 to 25-minute walk from the River District. When we moved into the neighborhood, the River District was under construction, you know, future home of baseball diamond, future home of community center. Like none of those promised amenities on the billboards have arrived yet. But you know, you see it's a neighborhood full of toddlers, full of strollers. So what you're saying is absolutely true. Like these people are going to be needing a school in the next 2 or 3 years. Like we don't have time to build the school that they'll require by the time those kids get to kindergarten. So what I think we need to do for places like the River District and Olympic Village and, you know, other neighborhoods where you know, enrollment is just through the roof, is that we need to at least offer the children an ability to go to the same school as their neighbors. So you can go over to your neighbor's house and say, hey, do you remember what the homework was, or what the teacher told us about this thing that we need to bring for school tomorrow? I forget. And you have that sense of community. And you also can avoid parents having to drive their kids all over the place by providing school buses, right? Like you're right. Champlain Heights is an under-enrolled school. It's up the hill, but it is not walkable, right? As somebody who lives at the bottom of the hill, I can tell you that walking up to those services at the top of the hill is like a hard walk. And so if we had a school bus that would pick up all the neighborhood kids and transport them together to an under-enrolled school where they could fill the classrooms in those under-enrolled schools and then be transported home at the end of the day, it would prevent, you know, the greenhouse gas emissions of having parents driving all over the city. It would keep that community connection, so the kids are at least going to the same school, even if it is not walkable. And I know that we don't traditionally have school buses in the city of Vancouver for non-designated students, but I think, I mean, to me, this just seems like kind of the obvious practical stopgap solution until we can secure more funding to build the actual classroom spaces that we need. So
it's the one that builds community and creates belonging.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, totally. Yeah.
Morgan, anything to add to there?
I'll add, well, sure. I mean, jurisdictionally, the city of Vancouver has no say on this. All they can do is suggest, and the province will say, thank you, we have a policy on this. And the policy is no, we're not paying for it. So, you know, the city of Vancouver does not have the jurisdiction for this. And, you know, the province downloading costs on the city of Vancouver is a major problem. Two, that neighborhood negotiated a community center instead of negotiating a school. I'm going to guess a school is more expensive. I'm going to guess that the developer was more interested in a community center because it's prettier and more fun looking, and it affects people longer in their lives. More people are affected, and as we know, that's always a problem in marketing, right?
Yeah. So let's time out then. The developer offered to build a school for free, and was declined.
Okay, so it wasn't built.
Really?
So the developer offered to build a school for free. It was not accepted.
By who?
Who did not accept it? Whether the VSB
like city council or the VSB?
The VSB declined it.
So the VSB has a policy, or you know, a political
Right.
Members of the VSB have expressed, I think,
right?
opinions about taking money from developers to build schools. I don't have the information on this, and it's outside of jurisdiction for what we're running on here.
But you know,
so it takes us to the value.
Let's talk about the lanes. Okay, let's talk about the lanes, and let's talk about funding now. Okay, what is a funding mechanism that every school district in the province has, except Vancouver? Francois?
What is a funding mechanism that every school district in the province has except Vancouver?
Correct.
I don't know what you're going to say. What is it?
One of the tax forms, but we do have school tax that goes to schools, right? But we don't get off.
Okay, explain it slowly, Morgan, for everyone to understand.
I don't remember the specific name, but there's, you know, the Vancouver School Board has not asked for funding to pay forward on capital expenditures. Future
school acquisition, school infrastructure,
for example. But the Vancouver School Board does have a way to fund this. It's not that it has no way to fund this. And the Vancouver School Board, let's not forget, has a significant income generation capability. it owns property that it rents space out. So it actually has a way to make money. Nevertheless, right?
I'll practice slowly. Vancouver School Board has the ability to charge a school site acquisition, school infrastructure tax, but it doesn't do so because of the Vancouver Charter.
Yes, but the Vancouver Charter is just a framework, right? It could
But it needs to be enabled in the Vancouver
anyway,
Charter for
but
the
it is
school board
it
to
is
charge a tax.
so
You're
the school
referring
board
to tax on residents who live in the vicinity of the school?
So it would be a tax on new development. So say the River District,
Mm-hmm.
you would have a school.
Right.
Olympic Village, you would have a school because
Mm-hmm.
the development would be so big and comprehensive that it would a little bit off of each unit would pay for your school.
Yeah, that seems like a very reasonable way of going forward. I mean, I've always thought it was weird that developers were allowed to build family-sized units and weren't required to add classroom spaces at the local school for the families that they're marketing to, often based on the quality of the schools in the neighborhood. So that seems reasonable, and I didn't realize that other districts are able to do that and Vancouver isn't. So
yeah, there's a lot to learn from a few districts. So the ministry is funding a few districts, like a lot. And what the ministry is doing is it basically says, what's your alignment between your city and your school board? Show us some proof that you guys are aligned. So a place that is really good at it is Nanaimo. What they have is they have the school site acquisition tax. So they basically are able to put their own money in when the ministry says, let's co-fund something. Where Vancouver is like, we don't have any money. Oh, well, the ministry says, well, go sell something then, or go, put something for 99 years. So that's a disadvantage that Vancouver has. And then what also Nanaimo has, and the city and the school board have policy that align their housing and school space planning, like actual written signed policy.
I think it's important to remember that the city that the Vancouver School Board does actually get money from taxation from the city of Vancouver, right? In the form of property tax, the school levy. And the Vancouver School Board says, yeah, well, we don't get all of it. And the answer is that's true, but you're not the only public school district in Vancouver. The school levy goes to various public education resources, including the city of Vancouver School Board, but it no longer has a monopoly on this. Now the issue of
school
the
tax,
issue, hang on, if I can finish, I would love to finish my stream of thought. A school infrastructure tax would be a lot easier to sell to residents of Vancouver because residents of Vancouver have to, they vote on this at the municipal level, right? This has to be done at the municipal level and then at the provincial level, because there's two places that this has to be done in the Vancouver Charter. The Vancouver Charter, a change to the Vancouver Charter has to be requested, of this kind would have to be requested by the school board. It would have to then be voted on at city council, and then it would have to be voted on at in the BC legislature. That's a lot of steps to go through. It would be inconceivable to go through these steps without solid backing by Vancouverites. And I think there's where the choke point here is. I have a feeling that there's not solid support in Vancouver for the argument that Vancouver doesn't have enough schools, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that I believe this. It's clear that River District, Olympic Village, Crosstown, Yaletown have not enough school capacity. It's clear, right? It's clear that there's too much.
You just said at the beginning,
housing capacity, right?
At the beginning, you said that we don't have the school spaces in the right spots.
That's right. And
then at the beginning, you said that your party has a platform to put a lot of housing where we have empty school spaces.
That's right.
And yet now you're still bugging it when you're saying that Vancouverites have the school tax and then the extra school tax and may not understand the school infrastructure tax, which will be the only school tax that they will actually see something get built. The other school taxes, where does it go? You don't
So-
see anything come out of that.
Whenever I
Like a lot of our taxes.
Yeah, that's the general tax.
Whenever I propose a position, I consider what the opposition is going to say to tear down my argument, right? And so when I'm thinking, when I'm saying, you know what, let's propose an extra tax to cover, let's call it's a transactional tax in new construction, right? That's a thing, and we're going to put that forward to the city of Vancouver. What will the opposition say? The opposition to that will say, why are we spending more tax money on that compared to, for example, emergency modular housing or acquiring land for social housing or things? And then we could say, well, we don't have enough schools in the right spot, right? And then they will say, why are you building there? Right? Wouldn't that be the argument that would happen, right? And I'm not expressing that I'm opposed to this. If the public is in support of paying an additional tax that will pay for infrastructure, like provincial infrastructure, I'll support it. But that said, the city of Vancouver does already get the infrastructure money to pay for new construction, and it's able to do the new construction. What's stopping the city today, right, is that there are these schools that are underutilized. That is the fundamental issue in Vancouver, and we need to address this because that stick is always going to be in our wheels. The city of Vancouver can help here, and Vancouver School Board, I urge you to advocate to the Vancouver School Board.
All right, let's not monopolize this conversation.
Council,
I want to bring it back to Francois.
Look at it.
Francois, I want to bring it back to you, and I want you to add a little bit of your view on taxation. And I do see Leona Brown just came in. Leona, are you here? Is your camera able to turn on? Hi, Leona.
Hi, Leona.
You're on mute.
That would have been so awesome if it didn't look silly now.
Hi, Leona. Hi. Okay.
Hi, Morgan. Hi, Francois.
Leona, great to see you. We're going to bring you into the conversation right now on this taxation part.
Yeah.
Okay, so the taxation part, the logic is really simple. The logic is like, let's take Olympic Village. The Olympic Village, the ministry will say, hey, school board, you're going to have to put in some money, maybe like 25%. So if the school is going to cost like 40 million, they're going to say, VSB, put in 10 million. And now the VSB looks at their money and they go, oh, we're the only school district in the entire province that is not able to raise our own school infrastructure revenue. So then the ministry says, well, too bad, so sad, you're not asking for it. So why don't you go sell something? And then dispose is a word, and nobody sells anything anymore. Instead, they lease it out for 99 years. So now they'll lease out something for 99 years and it's gone from the system. So going back to you, what we're talking about is a simple thing of having Vancouver have the right to charge a school tax based on development that every other school district has. Where do you think the money is going to come from to build the schools that we need? Leona.
I feel like this is a question that reminds me of like Uber Eats and stuff like that. Tax upon tax upon tax. And then to ordering food is not only $1.99 charge, it's like after all the fees, it's like $10 now to get your food delivered to you. It's really cringing to talk about taxing and where does that funding come from? And admittedly, I don't know all of that information. I would like to see that transparency happen, especially in a city that, makes $32 billion. And why can't we live as this fabulous society that we should be living? It's based on greed and, economics that are not being shared fairly. I know people have to make money, but I mean, this is just crazy. And my question all the time, especially around affordability with schools and projections and from the Indigenous point of view, we always suffer the most around this. And my point of view as an Indigenous person, you're on unceded territory. You make $32 billion in income in 1 year. Where is that for Indigenous people? That's on the city level alone, not talking about the federal level. And the federal level, I've been trying to get that transparency around the federal government, which is, will show that like why we call ourselves a commodity. We're just a dollar sign. We're paper shuffled everywhere, and money is shuffled because we identify as Indigenous. I've been trying to get the transparency around that we know certain amounts of funds from the federal government go into schools because we self-identify as Indigenous people. So if that's the case, why are we the least supported in the school system? And, you know, we should actually be having more of our own schools. And these types of things are, you know, my head hurts sometimes because in trying to educate this with the public and fellow Indigenous people, it just gets overwhelming because, you know, we're a community that likes to share. We build community, we share our wealth, we share our food, we share our environment. And, you know, we just expect that sharing back. This is all part of a whole decolonizing system that needs to happen. Clarity and conversation needs to happen between municipal and federal situations and the entire country. We need to be, I know we need to look at other countries, but we also need to hear our parents. We need to hear what is happening here. Because like, after I heard this document, I'm just like, how could these projections even be accurate?
Yeah.
Not only are they false, they're contradicting each other at every turn. Like the city's projecting all this growth. I mean, for the Broadway plan alone, it's a 10-year plan. They've already started it. They've already developed in plans up in density, and we're talking 2-3 bedroom houses. What does that mean for families? We're thinking, oh yay, you're building for families. That means more families will come in. That means more schools are needed. More schools are needed closer together to build a closer community. But then the VSB is saying, well, no, we're not, you know, they're contradicting their projections. And from my point of view, it's they're working together to kind of sleight of hand type of thing. You know, they're supporting the growth. The VSB wants to make money and only have a small amount of schools here, but the city wants growth, and they only want growth for workers, not for families. But that's not gonna, that plan won't work because everybody comes here to settle as a family. Everybody does. And I've been here since 1995, and I've been part of the first school closure conversation when I first started actively, you know, voicing my opinion about the strategic way that they're moving out Indigenous people. To me, I took it personally. You're moving out Indigenous people strategically by closing these schools on the East End. From exactly where I sit, I have 3 kids, and then I'm on station here, this area. So I have one in high school at Gladstone. And then like all of these schools, they're at Queen Alex. Oh, it's closed. Maybe I'll move them Britannia. Nope, that's closed. Well, still have a high school here. Nope, Gladstone's on that closing list. Can I move them to Van Tech? No, it's on a closure. Can I move them to Templeton? No. So what are you doing to me? You're moving me outside of the city because there's no way I'm going to be enrolled in a West Side school. That's not going to happen. And it's all strategic in the building plans. Like this Broadway plan was already in place years ago during Kennedy Stewart's run. He had the opportunity to have this transparency and really advocate for families to live here. Sustainability happens with families.
Mhm.
We contribute to the economy, and it just taxes is just more taxes, and it just means less affordability. And then we're screaming around for more social housing, and then we have municipal government saying, nope, it's the federal government. Federal government's nope, it's the city problem.
That's wrong. Thank you,
Um,
Leona.
I mean, I think it's totally true that we have a serious problem in Canada with the way that taxation happens in general. And nobody in Canada ever wants to have the Confederation talk, because it's like, the big question, the bee's nest, the hornet's nest that you don't want to poke, because then maybe Quebec will separate or whatever. But we need to have the Confederation talk. I mean, we have First Nations are demanding a true nation to nation relationship with the federal government. And in order to have that relationship, we need to reopen Confederation and look at how the federal government can devolve some of its responsibilities to to First Nations. But then I think at the same time, we also need to be advocating for basically the issue is that in Canada, for every dollar that we spend in taxes, about 60 cents, give or take, goes to the federal level, about 30 cents goes to the provincial level, and about 10 cents goes to the municipal level, right? But the municipal level is where we actually encounter most of the big issues in our daily lives, and they have the least ability to actually raise revenue to deal with these problems, and they're constantly relying on funds coming from above. The problem is that those funds are given, no matter who's in power, they're given for purely political reasons, right? So the party in power will see that they want to shore up support for their party in a particular part of the country, and then that's where they'll build the infrastructure projects, right? And it doesn't matter who's in power. That's the way the system works. So I actually think that what we need to do is we need to reopen Confederation, remove the community charters that are limiting municipalities across the country on what they can do, because municipalities basically exist as fingers, as appendages of provinces, and they don't really have the powers that they need to deal with the 21st century crises that we're facing. And I think we need to demand that the federal government gives back that 60% of tax revenue directly to regions and municipalities in order to pay for housing, transportation, food, energy, and safety. And safety is like community safety. It's safe, climate resilient infrastructure. And it's also the safety net, right? So they would give money to provinces and for health and education, and they would give money to municipalities to deal with these other things. And I think that if we had regular, predictable, direct funding based on StatsCan data from the federal government, all of these plans that regions have, they'd actually be able to start putting the shovels in the ground and start getting things built. Because right now, the way it works is the city employs tons of people to write reports and to be outside consultants or whatever, to justify to higher levels of government why we need funds for things. And instead of that money going to the project that is actually being proposed, it winds up getting caught up in millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. Then the government changes and you need to start the whole process over again and start the conversation over again. If we just took the politics out of it and it was like a direct transfer, I think that would really solve a lot of things. But I mean, that's definitely outside the scope of what American do.
Francois, thank you for that. And Leona, thank you. And again, thank you. It's a fascinating topic when we talk about taxes and what it takes. I'll just summarize the takeaway here. In a country as rich as Canada, in a province as beautiful and as resourceful as British Columbia, and in a city that is growing dense, and we see so much construction and so much luxury out there, taking a little bit and putting it towards schools is a no-brainer. How it gets done, at the end of the day, there's only one taxpayer, and we're looking at all that. It's just one person. We only have a limited ability to be taxed. We want quality out of our taxation. So let's move on to a different topic. Before that, I want to give a very warm welcome to Leona Brown. Leona Brown is an independent candidate for mayor. Leona Brown is a passionate volunteer. She volunteers for a lot of food. That's one of her passions, is nutritious food for all children. And another one is she is the rep for parents on the Vancouver School Board Indigenous Education Council. So Leona, warm welcome to you. Thank you for arriving, even though you're late. But thank you. It is good to reflect on one thing that we talked about, vulnerable people. And Leona, you mentioned East Side, East End. So this algorithm that the VSB has, at the end of the day, it basically does all its numbers, and then it spits out what the school enrollment forecast is. And then it basically says, here are the 18 schools that, you know, are going to have lower enrollment. And then those 18 schools don't have any plans at all to be made seismically safe. And then if you cross-reference that list with what would be in the land asset strategy for disposition, you see 13 schools that are marked for closure consolidation. All of those schools, except one, would be on the east side, so east of Main Street. So whatever this machine is, this algorithm that comes out and spits out this is what it produces. It produces results that basically overwhelmingly affect the east side, where more of our vulnerable people are. And I wanted everyone to comment on this. We'll start with Leona, then Morgan, and then Francois.
So to comment,
what is the fundamental unfairness of this algorithm?
well, I'm gonna say it's like a Kennedy effect. And that I say by it's an algorithm where you punch in numbers that of results that you want to see. So if you're strategically pushing out families out of the development system and only wanting to cater to workers, of course your algorithm is going to say that there's going to be less families here in like 10-year plan, when that's not the case. We're not voluntarily leaving, we're being pushed out. There's so much to talk about it, and it's always brought back to the contradiction of development and the schools that are needed. And especially when you're talking about growth, we need more schools. They need to be closer together to build these communities. And I don't know what else to say right now. I'm just like really frustrated that, you know, it always comes back to like my point of view of being an Indigenous person, and like, you know, with the Broadway plan and growth, and we're supposed to be creating this awesome society. I'm not even going to be part of it. Like, you know, imagining a future, and on Saturday evening, I win the mayoralship, and like, wow, I get this fabulous job. I'm already displaced from social housing. I probably can't even afford to live here. Like, I wouldn't even know if there's housing available for me to live in this city as a mayor, right? It's like, it's crazy how these algorithms are created by developers and people who want to see money projection, not how to grow families in this city, and how that is a more sustainable way of building a society. We need to support families. We need to, if you want real projections, like when I think of the projections and like algorithms, and I think of like the Reed polls and stuff like that. And then they have this like weird number of like, oh, only 50% of people agree on this. And it's something that or say like school closures, 50% of parents agree on school closures. Well, where was my answer? I didn't get that questionnaire. And how can you say that? That's false. That's like another algorithm saying like, this percentage and these amount of people talked for everybody when it doesn't. It's not fair.
So you want to
not
see
fair.
you want to see the assumptions and the underlying, show the work of how you got those numbers. That's what you want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you get those numbers? Because that's not how I'm feeling. I don't feel those numbers. I don't feel that projection. I
Mhm.
feel I'm being pushed out of this city because I have a family. My family who in short terms, 5 years, maybe my oldest is 18, will have a child of her own,
Mhm.
want to stay here. Because Indigenous people, we ground ourselves to where we call home. Even though I'm not from this territory, I've stayed here for so long. This is my home. This is where in spaces with Indigenous people
Yeah.
really connect to the lands that we're on, and we really cherish the space that we're in.
Mhm.
If you're colonization pushing us out again, we just feel so angered about it. And there's a better way to do it. There is a better way to live an amazing society if we take the greed and those money algorithms out of it.
And you don't want to be feeling like you're being pushed out.
Yeah, we want to
Yeah.
be part of the community, in which we
Yeah.
should be. All of us. There was once upon a time where elders and older people, a generation that had their own homes and handed down generation after generation to their children, and they stayed here, they established themselves. That is not a possibility anymore. Like years ago, we were already talking about we can't even afford a home. Now, in my age, I'm so old now that we're already looking at like, how is Vancouver, even if I can luckily somehow stay here, how is the system going to support me as an elder person? It's not going to. Where are those projections, right? You're pushing out elder people. There's no supports for that either.
Yeah. Thank you. Morgan. The
Well,
question here to refocus is, another way to ask it is, why are we not using where kids live and will live for forecasting?
well, we can't. So the school board has a challenge in forecasting, which is the city of Vancouver hasn't been telling it where construction is going to be, or it hasn't been listening to the Vancouver School Board about where construction should be. And the reason why that is, of course, is that the city of Vancouver answers to city of Vancouver voters, and the Vancouver School Board answers to city of Vancouver voters. And unfortunately, just like this, the situation in Vancouver School Board reminds me of my phone. Okay, my phone. I've worked in telecoms, right? And I remember one day when I realized that that in the database that looks at like all the things, there's this database table called customers, and there's another database table called subscribers, right? And then the subscribers to the phone are not actually the customers of the phone company, right? The phone company customers are the people who buy the data about the customer, about the subscribers. And in a way, it's the same in school board. And it shouldn't be like that, but that's how it is. The school board, of course, deals with the province. It's a branch of the provincial government in reality, right? But it's actually the school board trustees get reelected by city voters voting on civic issues at the side of city hall, city council candidates, and of course based on what they've done. But the challenge is that the people who are subject to the outcomes in the schools, parents, they're a stakeholder group, but they're not actually the customer, right? It's just so weird, but this is how it is now. And this is a dynamic that's so hard to work with. Now, I remember in 2016, 2017, fighting with the Vancouver School Board on their long range facilities plan back then and poking holes at their planning. And it was terrible to see what I would see. For example, I noticed that part of the justification for closing the schools was the overdue maintenance that had not been done. That the maintenance debt was so high that it wasn't worth fixing the school. Might as well shut it down. it's kind of like saying, I don't want a school over there. I'm not going to take care of it. I'm going to let it get derelict. And then I'm going to say it's derelict. I can't fix it. Right? Really, it felt like it was creative. Now,
Like Balmoral.
Leona, you talk about like, is this on purpose? I want to say it can't be on purpose, but it certainly looks like something in there is not right. Right? Now, I'm mindful, and here we're straying into schools again, school policy. We're all here are candidates for council or for mayoral, not school policy. But I do remember noticing about how a significant number of kids who are from the foreign students program, paying a lot of money into Vancouver schools, are being put into West Side schools, keep justifying their existence, right? That was kind of weird. I think that I feel that I don't agree with that. I don't agree with Vancouver schools having had to go out and basically become private schools basically for foreign students to pay for the schools. And because those private school students in the Vancouver public schools only want to go to West Side schools, then we're going to save the West Side schools at all costs because they're money making. That is not the mandate. Now, back to the question, what is going on? Why, Leona, why are we being pushed out of Vancouver? Why do so many people feel like we're being pushed out of Vancouver? Why is it that so many of us feel like that we are one demo eviction away from being kicked out? And I can tell you how close to home that is for all of us. I've been demo evicted once. I've been priced out once. Today, a voter comes to me on the street, says, Morgan, I voted for you, something like this. Another voter comes up and goes, Morgan, remember we talked about this and that and affordability? Well, I just got my eviction notice, right? Eviction notice, demo evicted, gonna fix up the house or whatever. Why? To add more price of rent. Why? Because there's such a dearth of available housing in Vancouver that owners of houses stand to make a great deal of money by charging the maximum they can. And they'll always, everybody will charge the maximum they can that's privately motivated. I mean, we kind of know that, right? Not everybody's altruistic, but they'll charge whatever someone will pay. And there's someone with more money who'll take that unit because there's not enough housing in Vancouver of the right kind. Because Vancouver, this goes back to the question. The unfairness comes from the fact that Vancouver has plenty of housing of the wrong kind and no housing of the right kind. Vancouver School Board, DPAC, we all have kids. We all have one or two or more kids. We need 2 or 3 or 4 bedrooms, right? And well, we know there's no 4 bedrooms, none that people who can't afford a penthouse apartment can afford. We know that there's very few 3 bedrooms for rent, and they're outrageously expensive. As a matter of fact, in June, I did some analysis. Vic, you set me straight on a bunch of things and that. But basically, the numbers were still brutalist, so brutal. The cost of rent in Vancouver, if you're like coming in and renting, from what I remember, $1,700 a month plus $1,000 per bedroom, right? Well, it's way more than households can afford. It turns out that the median household in Vancouver can't even afford a 1-bedroom. The 1-bedroom on the market that's not subsidized, that you haven't been in for a while. So anybody who has to change over their housing, let's say today, is going into unaffordably expensive housing. So what do? Well, Leona touched on it. They think, is this worth it? Or am I going to leave, right? Can I handle this? What's going to happen next time? And then they cut their losses and they leave. And they break their bonds and they leave, which is why Progress Vancouver is pushing to make it cheaper to build housing, faster to build housing, but only multifamily housing, 4 floors, 6 floors, depending on the use. And we're going to liberate the ability to get that housing built in the neighborhoods all over town, adjacent to the schools that are underused, in the hope that developers will go, ooh, I'm going to make some money, a little bit, not as much as I could have in the past, but some. And I'm going to have an advantage being next to that school because that school's got spaces. So it's going to be cool. And then Progress Vancouver will tell the city of Vancouver, if we have a majority, so please get us a majority, we'll tell the city of Vancouver to start the Vancouver Civic Housing Corporation. And this corporation will be a rental agency for the city. It's going to buy up city-owned land. It's going to buy up land, and it's going to use city-owned land to do exactly what you said, Vic. This CMC VCMC. I can't. I'm dyslexic. I'm sorry. Anyways, the corporation is going to buy up land, or increasing the stock of city-owned land, and it's going to use it exclusively for rentals in the and to create a rental stock in the city of Vancouver whose pricing structure is in the best interest of the city of Vancouver, rather than being in the best interest of, for example, REIT owners. I mean, we all know REITs are buying up our buildings, right? Even houses now, it's terrifying. And the idea is this is going to put downward pressure on the cost of rent. Rents are going to go down. Hopefully, there's going to be a slow decrease in the cost of land in Vancouver as well. And this is going to result in more affordable housing and more affordable rentals in Vancouver. So, Leona Brown, you're not going to have to get nudged out of the city by financial pressures. And so also we're going to be able to build up around our neighborhood schools and justify forcing the province to seismically upgrade them and to do the maintenance. And this is what's really missing, the ability to force the school board and the province to do the maintenance, because they've run out of arguments. VSB is always making arguments saying, we can't possibly fix up this school, not worth fixing up this school is underutilized. If the utilization goes up, they will have no more arguments to not take care of the infrastructure.
I think you're making sound sense there, and that's what the VSB calls their business cases. Their business cases need to have that backing from the city. That's really where we want to go, is we would like the city and the VSB to do their homework together and then go to the ministry with a unified plan. Morgan, that was amazing closing comments. We're almost wrapping up. I'd like to get Francois to piggyback off of what you just said, focusing back on affordability and on what it means for, more supply, but also what it means for the neighborhood school and affordability for families. And then we'll just make quick concluding remarks, and then we're wrapped up. So Francois, and then Leona, concluding remarks, back to Morgan for concluding remarks, and then back to Francois for final concluding remarks. Okay?
Okay. Thank you. Hopefully I will provide the appropriate segue that you are looking for. I think that when we're talking about utilization and underutilization of schools on the east side and the equity issue, I think it's really important to remember that for a strong social safety net, we absolutely have to have fully funded knots, right? Because the knots are what keep the social safety net intact. When they're afraid, people fall through the holes and it doesn't work. It doesn't catch anybody. No place is better suited to understand the needs of a community and the needs of families than the neighborhood school, right? Teachers often know that families of the students in their classes are struggling, and they have no ability to access the resources that those kids need. So really what we should be doing, instead of talking about underutilized schools, we should be looking at putting services into the schools so that the schools become community hubs, and we can fill them with the counselors, the housing advocates, the medical professionals, the mental health care professionals that neighborhoods need, so that there is no such thing as an underutilized school. And I can tell you from having been in many, many, many schools, like these supposedly empty rooms are always fully used by students and by teachers, and for breakfast programs and for like a wide variety of different things. There is no such thing as an absolutely sitting empty classroom. So to bring it back to affordability, I mean, if we have fully funded schools that are acting as the neighborhood centers that they can be, we create that feeling of community connection. We keep people living in the city, and it has to all go together. And I'm just going to plug one more time the school bus idea, because I really do think that in the meantime, we should be looking at options like that to help to keep kids at their local schools. So,
thanks. Leona, concluding final remarks. If you, we can do a lightning round if everybody wants. We can, go around and ask point questions, or we can just, I think we've had a great dialogue here. I'm really, really happy with the results. This has been an amazing conversation. Please do spend, 2 minutes concluding, and what's your takeaway that you would like to leave voters with, and also, what's your hope that we solve this problem?
Well, I think this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed this conversation, Morgan and Francois. You guys are amazing people yourselves, and love that you're in this space. And even if none of us win or one of us win, at least we're voicing what we need to voice, really, in our own perspectives. And it's really grounding us back to schools and housing. They go together, they're linked, and the municipal level needs to have more transparency with the school boards, and school boards need to have that more transparency with their DPACs, with their PACs, with their parents. How do we create community if we're always bombarded with policy and barriers? Everything from bullying to, mental health issues, and sustainability, again, in housing and living here. Transparency around reconciliation, a city that calls itself reconciliation. I want to see why does it make it feel like our Indigenous people are strategically being pushed out? And, low-income people, we can't have a city that's, developing 2-3 bedroom houses on the Broadway plan that's not projected for families. And I've heard this throughout this campaigning, and all these panels and forums and discussions and debates, that these big parties are always talking about affordable housing so your workers can live in the city and work here. So that just tells me, again, you're not building these homes for families. These 2-3 bedrooms should be for families, not for workers. So what you're creating and developing with is not only greed with developers and yourself, really, is you're creating a new version of SROs that we're trying to get the homeless out of these SROs and have dignity and living together. And you're creating a society that's not good. You can't have a city where it's only for single people, and then open up the Grandview Strip and cover it up so they can party all night and forget about their troubles. It's not going to work. We need to project this city focused on parents, the schools, the expansion. Sure, the expansion can happen, but expansion comes with families and schools. We need more of that. School closures, there's absolutely a better way to do that. The simplest, most obvious way is, like, if a school is old, a school is neglected, take accountability that you didn't look after that in the first place. Second, don't just close the school and displace all the students that are there already. What can be done is the field space, that's the land asset that's with the school, you can build on that just as quick as you put up like a 60-level tower and build a properly seismic school while the kids are still using the old school. And then that can be torn down and more students be housed or placed in the newer school. There's better ways to do things. And all this politics and secrecy in camera is not fair. Not fair. From my point of view as a voter, I voted you in. I want transparency. Why are you doing this? Why are you making decisions behind closed doors and not including everybody? And from the mayoral candidate run, it's like we all should be talking together. Vancouver School Board, Parks, City, we all should be, at a table talking about how are we going to build a better and just society in this city together. Never mind these barriers and policies of like, we can't talk to you about this, or we're going to blame you for this. We're going to blame you for this.
Yeah, totally. Leona, when you're talking about transparency there, just to bring it home for the viewers, are you talking about the the fact that only in Vancouver, again, only in Vancouver, no other school district faces this, is that the seismic decision is not made by the trustees and is made without public involvement. Is that what you're talking about, the seismic decision?
Everything, because every choice that the school board announces realistically doesn't involve parental consultation. It doesn't involve how is it going to affect the community. There's no transparency in that. When you make a decision to close schools,
yeah.
you're not asking us that are in those schools right now. Do you know, do you want to close the school? Do you think you're going to hang around for a few years? No, you're making a decision on my behalf.
Well, they're making the pre-plan for it, but they will eventually, 6 months before they close, they will do the consultation, but they're making the pre-plan for it. So I got you.
Yeah. You're still just making a decision without my consult.
Yeah.
And pushing me out. Anyway, Leona Brown, gets that Nishka, vote for me, mayor. Three wonderful other options here too.
Great. Morgan.
Thank you very much. Leona, you talked about the way our city is just creating more SROs that really touches something in me. So in Progress Vancouver specifically intending to do away with SROs by bringing everybody who can be brought back into regular community living in mixed community housing. And that's one of the intentions of the Vancouver Civic Housing Corporation, is to have housing for everybody, including off-street homelessness in a model that looks after people. Fundamentally, everybody in Vancouver, whether they're a learner in school, or whether they're an elder, or whether they're someone who's a worker or a family, they deserve to live their lives in dignity and in safety. This is a universal expectation, and we're not doing a good job of that. Our schools are sometimes, it looks like it's getting worse in our schools, but you really see that on the street, right? And like I said, Progress Vancouver really believes that housing affordability is the root cause of all of the crises that are piling up onto each other to create ultimately unsafe environments, violence, and just a desire to leave that we're seeing in people. Vancouver's just become unwelcoming, and we have to turn that around. I would be remiss not to mention, since this is the context of Vancouver School Board, and since Vancouver School Board extends out into Area A, UBC, I want to plug my colleague Jonah Gonzalez, who's running for director of Area A. Please support Jonah Gonzalez. He's an amazing young leader, full of potential. He's a member of the Squamish Nation. We actually just received a very solid endorsement, thanks to him and with him, from the spokesperson of the Squamish Nation just a few days ago. Very, very proud of the work that Jonah is doing, and it would be amazing to have a partner like Jonah at the UBC side of things and a Progress Vancouver council, because one of the commitments we have is to get the SkyTrain extended to UBC and to get shovels in the ground by the end of our first term. And having a partner on the other side that supports this would be a fantastic thing. In closing, I see you, the parents of Vancouver with kids in Vancouver. I went to Vancouver schools, went to Eric Hamber. My sister went to Vancouver schools. Our kids, my child, and two of my kids went to Vancouver schools, or are in Vancouver schools now. And we can really see how the school board is struggling to deliver the infrastructure and the maintenance and the things that it should be able to take care of. And we're here to help get the housing built for less money than it costs today. And we're going to focus first around schools, parks, and transit nodes, because we think that people should be in walkable neighborhoods. They shouldn't have to take a school bus or a car to their schools. I used to live on top of Elsie Roy Elementary. My child didn't go to Elsie Roy, went miles away because of the problem with availability of housing and schooling in the same place. This is just not okay, and we have to do something about it. Progress Vancouver will get this taken care of, and we will take actual concrete measures. If people want to see more about us, progressvancouver.ca, click on the button that says vision, and then you have a PDF of our entire campaign plan. There's a lot of information there, but I think you'll like it.
Thank you, Morgan. That's great. And Francois.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And Leona and Morgan, this was a great conversation. And it really highlights something that I've noticed in all of my campaigns that I've been involved in, which is many. If you look at my track record, I've run for office many times, always on a shoestring budget, and always to bring forward issues that are really important to me and that I don't hear people talking about. And the thing that I find so frustrating is that on the debate stage, politicians always agree. They always agree that we need more affordable housing. They always agree that, homelessness is an issue, that the opioid crisis is an issue, that schools are an issue. They always agree with everything. And yet when they get into office and they actually govern, instead of looking for the areas of agreement and working together to solve problems, they focus on wedge issues to kind of polarize and drive a distinction between themselves and their political opponents. And it's not because they're bad people, it's because that's the way that the system was built. Like our first past the post voting system really doesn't allow collaboration and people working together. And I think that that's why it is so imperative. Like our city is at a crossroads. I grew up here. I've been a school board employee. I've been a park board employee. I've worked in retail. I've worked in social services. Like I've done lots of things and lived in every neighborhood of the city. And I recognize that basically the decisions that we make over the next 10 years are going to either determine whether we, honestly, the way I feel about it, whether we survive this century intact. I see it as that kind of an existential crisis, and we're at a turning point. And I think having an independent in the mayor's chair, someone who's able to really look at the ideas that are coming from all of the councillors and all of their really diverse and varied experience, and put them together and keep people on the same page and focused on a common goal is absolutely essential. So I did mention I'm a teacher. And as a teacher, this is something that I have a lot of experience with, because we have students who come into our classrooms with all different kinds of backgrounds, all different perspectives, different belief systems, and yet we manage to get the job done and work together as a learning community and, achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve and inform each other and collaborate. And so this is something I practiced in. It is what I would do as mayor. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak to the DPAC members about school issues today, because schools are at the heart of our communities and Vancouver is on the wrong track. And if we want to get back on the right track, we need to vote Francois for mayor. I mean, Leona, you're great too, but I'm going to put in my plug for myself. I'm passionate, I'm pragmatic, and I'm here to get the job done. I'm ready and willing and able, and sponsored by nobody but my mother. She helped me pay for my banner that you may have seen around town. And I think that it's important too to pay attention to who people's funders are, because I really truly am an independent. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Oh, you're more than welcome. We want to thank you. This was, again, it blew away our expectations to have the three of you here, to have actually had 4 people respond to the 16 questions. Audience, please look at the questions. They're not easy ones.
Mhm.
They're case studies. There's examples of what's coming up. And, this discussion wasn't easy, but what we have is we have just 2 things, right? One is we have a feeling that we're being pushed out. We have a feeling that something's not right about the way that our growth is being done and how it's aligned with our amenities and especially with our school spaces. And lack of school spaces should not make people feel like they're being pushed out, but they are. We all have those stories, and that's not good. The second takeaway is we are very, very rich, abundant, and resourceful country. And this is a minor problem at the end of the day, and one that we should all be able to get solved. And it's a real issue. And that's kind of where, the DPAC way is, well, who's really interested in this deep issue? And you know what? The 3 of you have shown that. So I thank you. We thank you as parents. You guys did incredible amount of work. We're going to circulate those answers because those answers come win, lose. We wish you all the best, but it is a legacy that you are leaving behind as engaged citizens for everyone. So what your work is going to be meaningful, and we really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think we have to praise each other and uplift each other as well, because I see this movement happening where even though we're running independent or with the various parties, we know who the strategic planners are in this election with the main parties, the top 5 who are only paying attention to. But this campaign has allowed many of us to band together under a same conversation as this. And how does everything connect in a circular situation? As like indigenously, everything is circular. Everything connects together in a way, in a pattern. And it's just so amazing to have these conversations. Like, I've been so like blessed to meet both of you in person and listen to you guys debate or panel discussions all over the city and learn more. It gives me, true, heartfelt hope for this city that, even though, we, either of us, we could win or not, but we have hope that the city, the public, the people that are voting are going to make those right decisions and make the change from voting mainstream parties to actually these grassroots parties, these independent people, these indigenous people, the people that need to make the change have to be at that table this year. And that's the best that we can hope for. And I'm just so happy that we can have these conversations without having to jab and poke and do those political tear downs, that we can have a decent conversation and agree that there is an issue. So how do we come together and sit at that table and make the change? Because win or lose, I'm going to be at that table in committees outside calling on you to help BSB, parks, and the city. I work all around everywhere. So this is not the last of me, for sure.
With that.